Taking evasive action, over and out.
Nico and Yannick hinted at a new album, and sure enough, information like the artwork, release date, and track listing was shared. Iron Maiden then released their extremely successful single, El Dorado, and then oddly enough, they began touring for the album before it was even released. The first leg of the tour only had El Dorado from this album. The art was done by Melvin Grant again. The album features many themes of space, travel, and strong themes of adventure. Bruce said that there was almost no preparation for this album. They recorded again the classic recording studio in the Bahamas, which they haven't been to in 20 years. The band was very relaxed, and there was a strong sense of nostalgia in the environment. Steve wrote a lot less on this album, and mostly just helped people put songs together. The album features a lot of classic Maiden, new Maiden, and experimental Maiden. It truly feels like all the eras combined. The production is a vast improvement over A Matter of Life and Death, and is easily one of their best sounding albums. The Final Frontier and Coming Home were released as radio singles, and El Dorado won as the best metal performance at the Grammys. With only one song and a recommendation from Bruce, The Final Frontier went number 1 in 28 countries, and it charted high in America. The band then continued the massively long and several-legged Final Frontier tour, featuring classic songs from the album. This is for a fact not their last album, but in some ways it could be their final frontier.
As he stares across the garden, looking at the meadows, wonders if they'll ever grow again.
1 hour later. 2 hours later. 3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
The Final Frontier is easily one of the weakest Iron Maiden albums. The artwork is pretty bizarre. I remember really liking it a while back. I thought that, color scheme and everything, it was spacey and cool and adventurous. But the Eddie looks terrible. He's just like awkwardly hunching over. The album came out in 2010. And the band pretty much even admitted that they kind of half-assed this one. They just put some stuff together really fast and put it out. Now, with a lot of the other albums before this, they had a lot of long songs, but I think they were long because they just happened to be long. They put so many ideas into them. With this album, it's like half of it they decided, hey, let's just make some more punchy songs, and then the rest of it is like the band would come up to Steve Harris with an idea, and then he's like, no, let's expand that for fucking 5 more minutes, how about? Ooh, that's a nice intro, let's, reprise that completely, and let's put another intro in front of that intro to make it, 8 minutes. Seems like a lot of the band is kind of slowing down this album. They sound kind of old. Bruce's singing sounds really bad at this point. He strains a lot of the vocals. Now, Adrian actually sounds really good. Every solo he plays in this album is actually really, really well done. But Yannick sounds like total ass in this album. He completely half-asses everything. And Dave Murray does not sound good on this album at all. All of his solos pretty much suck. Steve Harris sounds really slow and boring on this album. Not a single memorable, cool bass line or anything. Except maybe El Dorado. Now, the production of this album I actually like quite a bit because it's not mastered, but it somehow still has this really vibrant, lush sound to it. I don't know what it is, especially the guitars and the bass. Sure, some of the ideas are cool. Some of the ideas could have made really great songs, but a lot of the execution is not done well, and some of the songs were not interesting enough to make epics, or they would have made for good short songs, but they were dragged on forever and cluttered with all these intros, outros, midtros. Satellite 15, The Final Frontier. I remember the first time I heard this album, I was like, what the fuck is this shit? This whole intro is just a bunch of muddlefuck of noises and stuff trying to sound spacey and stuff. And it makes the actual song that it goes into, The Final Frontier, tedious, because this whole track is 8.5 minutes. But the intro is more than half of it, and it just draws on. like drones on forever. I mean, there's some cool parts to it, especially with like the first half of the intro. It actually builds up some decent spacey atmosphere. And it sounds like there's a drum machine. It does not sound natural at all. And during the second half of the intro, it just kind of like stops. And then Bruce comes in straining his vocals horribly. And then the guitars come in with like some horrible squeals. It basically just sounds like a bunch of satanic boars getting fucked in the ass. And then Bruce hits all these really bad high notes. It sounds like he's getting fucked in the ass by satanic boars. Then after that torture is over, you finally get into the final frontier. The verse or whatever is kind of whatever. The chorus is actually pretty nice, even though it's just the final frontier over and over and over. It's actually pretty catchy, even though Bruce strains a little bit. And there's a cool solo from Adrian and then Dave. They do a nice classic sounding dual solo section. And this part of the song actually does like sound like 80s Iron Maiden throwback stuff. Then you have El Dorado, and I used to absolutely hate this song. And it's like trying to be a long, catchy hit song like Number the Beast. So you start with this weird, bizarre intro. It sounds like Steve just like threw his bass guitar at a microphone or some shit, and then Yannick decided to go with it and start hitting random shit and banging his head on a board. You finally get into like some hi-hat action from Nico, and then you have the bass come in, and it's like, oh, we're going into a cool Iron Maiden gallop, and then you realize you're listening to Barracuda. But I'm not going to take that away from this song, because pretty much every Iron Maiden song is a gallop anyway, so who gives a shit? And then it goes into some pretty cool riffs in the verse, and I actually don't mind the verse. But then the second chorus they do at the end of the second section or whatever, it's just terrible. Bruce is hitting these really bad high notes that he can't hit. And then it goes into a really bizarre middle section where the first couple riffs of it sound pretty decent. It has this like Mid-Eastern vibe to it. Feels like monotony after that. They have a Dave and a Yannick solo. It feels like they're just cramming in time, trying to jam forever. And it just sounds really dumb after a while. It's really boring at this point. And then they just go back to the intro with the hi-hat action and go through all the motions again, just to have a payoff of that ear-raping chorus. Then we have Mother of Mercy, which is a pretty cool song, actually. I've always really liked it. The intro is like really melodic and atmospheric, and Bruce is actually singing it pretty decently. He's drawing you into the song and have a lot of great melodies. And then the song starts getting really heavy, and you get some really great riff action from Adrian. And they go into like a gallop, of course. I actually like the chorus, even though Bruce is straining horrifically with the Mother of Mercy. And the Adrian Smith solo is actually really awesome. To me, it sounds like sort of like a little bit of classic Maiden, a little bit was new, and I think it's done well. Then we have Coming Home, and I really don't care about this song. A lot of people say it's one of the strongest off the album. It's just a generic ballad to me. It doesn't do much. I kind of like the pre-chorus, but like the verse is generic. It's not even like beautiful and melodic like the Out of the Shadows. Then we have a really kick-ass song, The Alchemist. It's super catchy, it's punchy, it's straight to the point, it sounds like classic fast Iron Maiden. The riffs in here are pretty nice. There's a lot of crazy lead guitar riffs I believe Yannick wrote. The verse is really, really, really catchy and fast and sped up, and Bruce is singing pretty decently, although towards the end of the verse he's hitting some really bad strainy vocals. And then they go into like a cool first chorus, and then they go into like a second chorus that's even better, and Bruce is singing really well on that one. And that has a pretty decent Yannick solo. Overall, it's a really nice punchy song, probably my favorite off the whole album. This whole half of the album is all epic songs, but most of them come off, like I said, as just decent like throwback song ideas that people went up to Steve with. One of these big examples is the Isle of Avalon. We start with a long, really drawn out, ridiculous ass intro that's literally 2.5 minutes long, and it doesn't change that much, let alone like a couple lead guitar melodies here and there, but it doesn't like bring up an interestingness. Sure, I kind of like the intro a little bit. In fact, it's probably the best part of the whole song because it somewhat builds up atmosphere, but it's not like this song pays off or anything. When it finally goes into something, it's just really generic, cheesy sounding, shitty stuff. It's like drawing you into this atmosphere of epicness forever, and then fucking goes into like horrible, strainy Bruce Dickinson over a really dumb riff. It goes into a somewhat whatever chorus where Bruce is singing really weird, and then it goes into a middle section already that's not even that great. It just sounds like drum pounding and random shreddiness. We get a pretty decent Dave Murray solo, and then it goes into like a slow, groovy, jammy sort of section that they just jam over for like 2 minutes of Adrian soloing. And Adrian's solo is kind of whatever, and then it just goes right back into the long, drawn-out intro for fucking ever. This whole song is just filling up time for no reason. And it just keeps reprising that annoying, irritating verse, Bruce Dickinson straining his vocals forever. The song has no payoff, has no interestingness, it's annoying. The middle section is dull as fuck, and the intro goes on forever. Then we have actually a really good epic. This is Starblind, and this one's about 7 minutes. Basically goes through equal, if not more, motions than Isle of Avalon does, but it doesn't reprise stupid intros and stupid shit like that. It gets to the point, it has a payoff, it's interesting, it's catchy, the riffs are great, the lead guitar was great, and even the singing is great. We start with a kind of pointless intro, but it builds up atmosphere. In fact, it even is a short intro that actually reprises in the middle section, so it actually has a point. And then it goes into a really great Adrian Smith riff, and it kind of goes into a weird offbeat groove throughout most of the verse, and the chorus is kind of the same thing. Bruce definitely leads this whole first verse and chorus, though. His singing is really great. It's really precise, especially in the chorus, where he's kind of following the offbeat melody, but he's singing it so well. And then in the second verse and chorus, you have Adrian Smith throwing a lot of really great lead guitar melodies that are really rich. And then we go to a really good middle section where it just kind of stops. And then you hear Adrian play this really badass guitar riff. And with this middle section, it does not feel labored, forced, and like a just drone jam session that was half-assed. It feels natural. It feels like they have some really good riffs and played some really good solos over it, like they were writing a classic-sounding epic or something like that. You have a really cool solo from Adrian Smith that sounds really bluesy, and then it gets really more up-tempo. Then you have a really good solo from Yannick that sounds really good, and then it gets really melodic and ambient, like the intro. And then you hear Dave Murray play this really, really bluesy solo that sounds really soulful. It's easily one of the highlights of the album, and easily the highlight of this side of the album. Then we have The Talisman, which a lot of people hail as like the best song on the album. And I do find it enjoyable, but there's a lot of problems with this song. Mostly the fat and repetition. We start with an intro, because this is another Yannick Gur's epic song that's 9 minutes. He does the same type of shit usually on this epic, but instead of half the song being crazy and heavy and the other half being more slow, this one actually goes faster and heavier, more to the point right away. But before we get there, we have to do a 2.5 minute acoustic intro, because it kind of builds up atmosphere of a ship going into a storm and stuff like that. Go right into the epic, galloping, heavy riff that is this song. And the riffs in the song are very good, although they don't change them too much. The verses and stuff are pretty good, but Bruce is straining a little bit, but I think it works to create this chaotic, stormy atmosphere. And then you get to this first chorus. It's super catchy, it's super memorable, it sounds classic Maiden, and it's like one of their best choruses. It's like really good. And then they go through another verse and another chorus, and that sounds like it's going into kind of a middle section where Bruce is sounding really weird. He's hitting these like really harsh notes, and then they go into another transition. Each part just plays the same two transitions. And after this weird sounding build-up part, you go to this really terrible new chorus where Bruce is going like, "Westward the tide!" And then it goes into like a middle section that's kind of weird. because it just sounds like another sort of jam thing, but this time it's more interesting because it kind of sounds like a ship rocking in a storm, and you have Yannick play this really bizarre, like, whammy bar-infested solo. Then they go into some cool, quick riffs, but the middle section's over fairly quickly, especially for a really long song that's been droning on forever. And it goes through that weird, awkward-sounding part before the terrible chorus last time, but then it goes into the good chorus. It's like, oh shit, yeah! But then it goes to another one of those pointless transitions, and then, of course, Westward the Tide! And they play it so many times with Bruce strains so much that on one of the times, after the Westward the... and then he goes like, Tide, because he can't fucking do it anymore, and he just starts singing it normally because his voice is so destroyed. Then we have The Man Who Would Be King, which I would describe as sounding like a classic-sounding Maiden song, or like a classic Dave Murray, like still life type of song. It's melodic, it's more upbeat, it has a really great chorus and everything, even though there's a lot of cluttered lyrics that sound weird. The problem is that the song's like fucking 8.5 minutes, and first 2.5 or just 2 minutes of it are this intro that's super melodic and slow and kind of boring. And then it just stops, and it's like, okay. But then it goes into another fucking intro, and at least this intro's somewhat interesting, but it's like, good God, get into the fucking song. And after 3 minutes, we finally get into a fucking song. You get a pretty cool gallop and decent melodies and stuff, and then it goes into a really crazy build-up part with great lead guitar melodies and a really, really good chorus, like I said. Then it goes into a really weird, lengthy jam, where it's not as bad as like Isle of Avalon, but this one is really, really long, and Dave Murray's just kind of shredding all over the place. And then it just stops again, and then goes into a fucking boring, lengthy outro that has no place in the song. It's like 1.5 minutes of boring guitars and Bruce saying, "So far away, the man who would be king." Now we get to The Wild Wind That Blows. This song is the epic on the album. It's 11 minutes, and it could have been cool because there's a lot of moments on the song that actually show off like classic Iron Maiden melodies. In fact, even the middle of the song has this section that sounds like that. You see, they have a long-ass intro that is just noise of wind and shit, and then you get into some like bass playing and shit, and then you get into another intro. So already there's 3 intros, and then Bruce is just monotonously singing through this intro like the Talisman, like fucking get into it already. And then it goes into a like wet verse or whatever that's kind of heavy, but it's the same thing as the Bruce intro, so it's just like, okay. And then it finally sounds like it's going into something that goes into a slow epic gallop. It's like, okay, maybe we're finally getting somewhere, and Bruce is actually singing decently. And then we go into a solo from Adrian that's pretty cool. Then that's drawn on forever for some reason, for Dave Murray to throw in a solo for no reason. That just kind of stops and goes into this like same tempo might I add gallopy section, and it's just monotonous and boring at this point. It doesn't add anything. It's not like that melodic. It's not super epic or catchy. In fact, they even like have Bruce sing like 2 full sections of this shit. And then they throw in a terrible Yannick solo, and then they get to this section. You're already like 9 minutes into the song, and it just sounds like an outro sort of thing. And then it goes into another outro with the fucking wind, and then it goes into another outro with the fucking bass, and then it goes into another outro with the fucking Bruce, and then another outro with the fucking wind again. This song has no payoff. It has so many moments of like boring intros to get to something badass. After the more cool part that was like building up to something cool, was slow, was epic, they had the Adrian solo, they should have went into something crazy at that point. They should have went into something awesome like the second half of Dance of Death. Fucking half of this song, even more than it, it's just droning shit. And even the normal sections of the song aren't that great, but they could have been great if the song had a payoff. But the song doesn't have a fucking payoff. The whole thing is like the same tempo, and it doesn't get more epic. In fact, it gets worse over time. And for an 11-minute epic, they should have had a lot more diversity than 3 movements for the most part. Aside from the stupid intro and outro, all the song is 3 movements. And fucking Genghis Khan is 3 movements, and that song is like 3 minutes. And each movement of that is more epic and cool than this shit. So overall, that's pretty much why The Wild Wind Blows.